Good evening and welcome to another Northshire Presents virtual event. My name is David Wood. I'm the events manager at Northshire's bookstore's Manchester, Vermont location. As you came in, you may have noticed that we are recording tonight's event, but don't worry, only those of us who are unmuted will appear on YouTube for perpetuity. If any of you have questions at any point tonight, please type them in the chat and I'll save them up and we'll ask them at the end. Also, as a note of thanks before we get started, independent bookselling is a hard thing in the best of years, and the last couple haven't been the best. So we are still exist because of you, and we greatly appreciate your support. Finally, as you may have heard, there's been supply chain issues all over. So we're recommending that if there's a particular title that you'd like to get a hold of or gift someone or order this holiday, you should act sooner rather than later. Our shelves are full, but you've got plenty of options there for sure. But if there's a particular book you want, we recommend you order it soon. Now, it is my great pleasure to finally get to introduce Tal Birdsey. We've been corresponding about an event for Hearts of the Mountain for a long time, and I'm so glad that it's finally happening. Tal Birdsey co-founded the North Branch School in 2001, where he is headmaster and teaches writing, literature, humanities, and history, ethics, art theater, and edits the newsletter and the student literary magazine. His previous book, A Room for Learning, tells the story of the founding and first year of that school. His new book, Hearts of the Mountain, Adolescents, A Teacher and a Living School, a book that our friend Bill McKibben called A Magical Story. You can order it here in the link, if you have not already, in the link in the chat. We're joined tonight also to celebrate the publication of Street of Widows by Cassie Fancher. Cassie is a graduate of the North Branch School, and Street of Widows is a winner of the annual Howard Frank Mosier Book Prize. And finally, we are joined tonight by the writer, book designer, and publisher, Dee Dee Cummings. Here's the link for Street of Widows. She has published several books, I think I counted 9 of them, including health and lifestyle titles like Questions for the Dalai Lama and volumes of poetry, To Look Out From and The Meeting Place. She lives in Brattleboro and runs Green Writers Press. Dee Dee, Tal, Cassie, welcome to Northshire Bookstore.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dad. We're glad to be here and just so thrilled that we have the support of Northshire, because as the publisher of these 2 wonderful books, I'm just really delighted to partner with the bookstore. And Northshire is the venerable, Vermont bookstore, which now has new owners, which is a big change. But I've known Chris Morrow and, for years, the Morrow family for a long time, and it's one of my favorite bookstores. So, Vermont has so many great bookstores. So we're really lucky to be here. And, every time as a publisher, as Tal and Cassie's publisher, and then, some other titles, you can probably see a few up here in my bookcase. But I try to explain to the authors that we do not like Amazon. And it's funny because Amazon is almost like in people's consciousness. So we try to get away from Amazon, and we don't even want authors to use the link for Amazon to buy their book. And so many places just default to the Amazon link, and so our part of our mission, a big part of our mission, is to partner with the local bookstore. So here we are, and thank you for having us. And as you said, it's been, a long time in the making to launch these 2 wonderful books. Between various, we're a tiny press, and various things happened. Like, I had some family issues. Then my mom died right before COVID. I know there have been some delays, and both Cassie and Tal have, lost loved ones or moved and started grad school during the process of working on these books. But I'm just so happy that they're out. And, given the state of, the paper costs going up and printing delays and all of that, it's the books are out, and I'm really happy and want to celebrate these two wonderful authors. Both Hearts of the Mountain and Street of Widows. These are two of my favorite books. Maybe some other authors are listening too. I love all the books that I work on, but especially these two. And the Vermont connection is really strong. When I started the press, I was guided by Howard Frank Mosher, who many of you have probably heard of, the legendary Vermont writer who sadly died in January of 2017. But he just took me literally by the hand and helped me start the press. He was so excited to, keep literature alive and well in our wonderful state of Vermont. And I remember driving with him over to Northshire, and he introduced me. Daphith, is Stan Hines still there?
Sure is. He actually did an event for me and interviewed an author for me just a couple of weeks ago.
Oh, he was awesome.
Yeah, he's still there.
We just showed up in Howard's beat up old car and walked into Northshire and went in the back room, and it was packed with stuff. And there's Stan, who's the book buyer, in case you all don't know, but they talked baseball, and we had a great time. And so it's just great that this launch for Tal and Cassie's books are, that we're here. So I thought it would be really great to start off, and I don't really have like an agenda. I want to hear these writers read their work in their own voice. I'm really looking forward to that. So I'm going to sort of step back, but I do have I wanted to sort of structure it that I thought maybe, Cassie, you could read a short passage, but before you read, maybe you could just give us a little idea of the story, of the setting, just to kind of so people will know, and then a short reading, and then we can chat a bit, and then I'd love Tal to read. Sound good? Cassie, do you want to lead off?
Yeah, sure. I was going to read from a story. It's the last story in the collection, and it's the only story. Most of the stories were written for my senior thesis at Hampshire College, but this is the only story that I wrote afterwards, and submitted actually after I think Dee Dee had accepted the book. So this is the beginning of it, and I think it opens with a lot of setting. So I don't know. It's set in Vermont. And it's about a kind of unconventional family. I'll read the first few pages, so hopefully you won't be lost. All right, for Ava. First, I'll tell you about the house I grew up in, big and painted a dirty shade of red. The lawn scrubby, full of sticks, more moss than grass. My mother worked for Avon, a multi-level marketing company. She bought makeup in bulk from the company, went door to door trying to sell it to the neighbors. She was always getting new shipments in, boxes and boxes of waterproof eyeliner, liquid foundation, lip gloss, mascara, cuticle cream, nail polish, brushes, face wipes, anti-aging cream, and my favorite, bronzing pearls, which looked like rabbit poop but broke apart when I touched them into a fine gold dust. My mother bought more makeup than she could sell, lining the walls of whole rooms with boxes, sometimes too deep, sometimes blotting out light bulbs or covering entire windows so that inside our big house felt very small and dark. The trouble with my mother was she wasn't the kind of woman people wanted to buy makeup from. She wore too much on some parts of her face and not enough on other parts. She wore stretched out turtlenecks and always the same pair of green sweatpants, kept her hair dyed a bizarre shade of burgundy, double knotted her sneakers. She used unscented shower products, never smelled like flowers or vanilla. She slept in a different bedroom than my father. In fact, they slept in entirely different halves of the big red house. She kept the thermostat on her half at 55. He couldn't stand the clutter of the Avon boxes. They said they loved each other better that way, with some space between them. I was the middle child of 3 sisters, or so I thought until, parked outside the bowling alley on a playdate with 2 of my closest friends, my mother revealed that because she had frozen her eggs, I was actually, technically speaking, the oldest. My egg had been frozen the longest. At that point in my life, my mother had already taught me about sperm and eggs, the basics of baby making, but one of my friends, May Ellen, asked, "What do you mean Lucy came from an egg?" To which my mother responded with an answer so detailed, so eloquent, that I was never allowed to play with May Ellen again. My older sister, Caroline, did not take kindly to the news that it was actually me who was oldest. You're not a person when you're an egg, she argued. You don't know anything about the world, so it doesn't count. Then she told me that Walt Disney, the creator of some of my very favorite films, had frozen his corpse, was in fact lying on ice at that very moment in a locked freezer in Florida. My younger sister, Bee, who was only 2, didn't care about any of it until Caroline lay down on the floor, stiff as a board, eyes bulging, and pretended to be frozen and dead. Then Bee let out a single long wail, and Caroline had to get up quickly to demonstrate that she was still alive, while I made soothing noises and patted a steady rhythm into my little sister's back. My mother had no patience for crying, and if she had heard it, would have sent us mercilessly into the prickly front yard to keep an eye on each other while she locked herself in the house and took what she called a breather. My father lived on the south side of the house. He entered through the back door and rarely saw my mother at all, except at mealtimes. He'll never leave me, my mother said once, he'd starve. My father's side of the house was warm, full of ceramic bowls of fruit baking in the sun, always the smell of rotting oranges, sweet and sickly. In the summers, he picked wild flowers and left them in jars on the windowsills, shedding petals and pollen until the water in the jars turned to a brown film. There was a sun porch tacked onto his side of the house, cold in the winter, hot in summer. The floor sloped away from the house, down towards the yard. It was covered in plastic stick-on tiles meant to look like slate. There were black curtains stapled to the window casings and a lock that bolted from the inside, since my father, who used the room as his studio, often hired nude models. The floors and shelves were covered in a mix of paints, turpentine, brushes, hammers, drills, extension cords. In his spare time, my father worked as a handyman. For Christmas, my mother had given him large rectangular magnets to stick to the side of his purple van. They said Wilson Grotta, handyman, and included the home phone number, the one that connected to the kitchen phone on my mother's side of the house. We were not allowed on the porch where my father painted, none of us, not even our mother. My sisters and I had snuck in when my father wasn't home and seen for ourselves the reason why. There were white sheets over almost everything, the chairs, his easel, and pencil-drawn nudes tacked to the walls, taped to the blackout curtains. They all showed the same small, pale woman, bones protruding from her skin. In most of the images, she was turned away. My father seemed especially fixated on her vertebrae. In the sketches where she faced forward, he had taken his thumb and smudged out most of her face, like he had breathed too deeply and a gray wind had carried her away. That was the secret, we figured, that he did not just hire nude models, but one in particular. And then it goes on for a lot more pages.
Wow. Thank you. Well, you read beautifully. There's some great images there. Just even, I know it's interesting to learn that you're also doing a poetry major in addition to your MFA, like your fiction.
Yeah, that's sort of a recent thing. I took a poetry class last year as an elective as part of my MFA, just because I wanted to learn more. The poetry class was called like Nuts and Bolts of Language, I think, and I wanted to learn more about how words sound and how they can work, and then how punctuation can impact meaning and can be used more effectively than I was using it. Yeah. Which was kind of thoughtless, I guess. And I really liked it, and I really connected with the professor. So I am now doing a little bit more of poetry. I still feel weird thinking of myself as a poet, but I have been working with him on those poems, and then I'll take another class with him in the spring.
That is awesome. It's great because, even like right at the beginning, just the list of Avon products, and, you have this great way of setting the scene and the kids and the curiosity. The dialogue is more the fiction, but the descriptions really, a lot of them feel like poetry. It's really wonderful. And I don't know if you remember, Cassie, but that story when, so it's been a while since we started working on your book, but I remember the editor who chose Cassie's book from some really good submissions, she loved it and felt that the work was, that you had a voice like not unlike Alice Munro. And that's a really high compliment in my opinion, because you're so young. And at the time you were even younger, and none of us we read the submissions anonymously, and what a surprise that, we have such a young writer in our midst. And I'm just really proud of you, putting on my mother hat now. But, Julia Alvarez concurred when, when she got her advanced reader copy, she felt like you're an up and coming young voice, in the canon of Vermont writers. So that's really high praise from one of our favorite Vermont writers. And a lot of people I know say, like, how did she get a blurb from Julia Alvarez? And it's great. Or, Tal getting one from Bill McKibben. But, you both promised me, when you're super famous authors, like if a young writer comes to you and wants a blurb, don't blow them off, just because you were there once, So Cassie, this story was added on. And I remember the editor, Robin MacArthur, who herself is a wonderful writer and a Penn New England Award winner. And she's not really editing for us anymore because she's too busy with her own writing. But Robin wanted something at the end of this book. Remember? She wanted the feeling of not necessarily wrapping things up in a tidy way, but she just wanted more from you. And I think she pushed you a little bit. And I recall that, was this story written expressly for this collection?
No, I'd been working on it over the summer and had it sort of there, but had been lazy about final revisions. And then when she said that, I revised it specifically for this collection.
It's so great. And the stories are so varied, but there seems to me, I have two questions for you. The first is, how did you get into writing? And because it's kind of like a standard question, but I'm so curious because the fact that you were a student at Tal's school, North Branch School, none of us knew this until after the fact. And what a wonderful connection. And because writing, we'll find out more from Tal in a few minutes, but writing is so important in this school. I wouldn't say curriculum, it's probably the wrong word, but in the sort of ethos of North Branch, like the kids write about how they feel, and there's so much expression and and support of writing, putting your feelings into words, which I love. I wish I had that because I had the nuns who were not, I had 12 years of nuns, different education from North Branch for sure. But so were you writing then? Were you writing as a little kid?
Yeah, I was writing as a little kid. It's actually funny that you brought up Julia Alvarez because I used to write her fan mail as a kid. And I remember I wrote her a letter when I was turning 9, I think, asking her if she thought I was ready for her adult books. And she was very kind and sent me back a letter saying that she thought I was ready. So
Awesome.
I have been, my mom's a writer. And so I had been exposed to a lot of literature and as a kid. And then when I went to North Branch, I did a lot more writing than I had done previously. And that was personal writing, but I was thinking about it before this event, just how it prepared me also for fiction, because you write, each year you start out writing place descriptions and then character descriptions. I don't know if you still do it this way, but this is how I remember it. Place descriptions and then character descriptions, and then you write full stories. So you really take apart the story into pieces, and you do a lot of thinking about people and how they interact with spaces. And then you're also encouraged, I think, to write about people who you maybe are not necessarily having difficult relationships with, but having complicated relationships with. So you're thinking a lot about just if you're the narrator, which you kind of are by default at North Branch, you're thinking about complex relationships and how you can kind of come to see someone as a full person. Like, I think a lot of the process of writing the character descriptions is also better understanding a person through writing. And I think a lot of those skills have hopefully translated into how I write about fictional people as well. So I do think that is the first time I was doing a lot of writing and definitely influenced what I know about writing.
Oh, that's wonderful. And then undergrad, you did the English degree at Hampshire.
Yeah, Hampshire I went to because I knew that I wanted to write, and they don't make you do majors. So they make you do very few prereqs. So I mostly worked with,
Plan, you had like a plan there.
yeah, I worked with a group of advisors, and my one advisor, Will Ryan, I worked with for all 4 years pretty much, and wrote that collection of short stories with his help.
Terrific. Well, we'll definitely come back to you with more questions, and maybe if we have time. I don't know if we'll have time for another reading, but that was terrific. And Tal, are you ready for a reading?
I'm ready.
I'm really thrilled to see you here today, and sort of kind of in a low-key way I'm hosting this, but I just adore your book, and I feel I've read your book like 3 times in the various stages, and every time I read it, I have like another takeaway. Or I sometimes tell people that reading the book I felt like I was kind of getting an informal MFA in poetry, you know, and it's just great how you integrate literature. Well, in my case, it was poetry, but you know, literature that the kids are reading, but then you introduce them to poets, and like extraordinary poets that they might not necessarily be exposed to. And I discovered a lot of new poets from reading your book, and it made me want to reread, you know, like, I don't know, Animal Farm and some books that are like the standards for that age group. But you know, so if you want to just start off and read a section, you know, in the book, just to give an overview to our, you know, our people on Zoom, you know, there are many different students that Tal follows and kind of profiles throughout the book, and they come and they go. And as a reader, you really start to get attached to these kids, and they go through dramas, and it's just like part of the process, you know. And to be a young adolescent and have a place where you feel safe. I mean, I'm going to probably start crying because thinking about what happened recently in Michigan, I just can't even think about what it's like for kids these days. And, you know, reading Hearts of the Mountain just really restored my faith in education and the sense of belonging, because kids have it so hard anyway, that age. Just all the adolescent stuff, you know, that goes on. So welcome, Tal, and we'd love to hear you read a section from your book.
This is a brief section. I believe I'm with a class of 7th graders, and it's a literature class. And just describing a particular day. It says in the middle of the book, it's divided up into sections: the beginning of the year, fall, winter, spring. This is in the fall, so it's the beginning. It's the end of the you know, summer. Late summer's dying out, and so that's a part of this. Rachel Carson urged the inculcation of a sense of wonder in children by simple measures. She wrote, "And then there's the world of little things, seen all too seldom. Many children, perhaps because they themselves are small and closer to the ground than we, notice and delight in the small and inconspicuous. So she offered this counsel: give your child a magnifying glass. I ordered 28 magnifying glasses of glass and plastic ergonomic grips, complete with vinyl lens protective cases. I hoped that what we might see in those lenses would fascinate and ignite wonder. We were also reading Dylan Thomas's Fern Hill in literature class. Before we started, though, I sent the 7th graders out to the stone wall to collect bunches of wilting ferns. When they came back, I asked them to look at their ferns and list all the ways they could find something out about the ferns. They proffered many ideas. Look it up on the internet or in a book, or ask an expert. Observe the ferns in their habitat. Observe differences and similarities between ones that thrived and ones that did not. Look at them, turn them over, look at them from another angle." Then they went a little further. Take them apart, disassemble them, rub them on different parts of your body, smear them, shake them, smell them, taste them, drop them, bend them, freeze them, or burn them, blow air through them, count the parts, look for patterns in their construction. Then I walked through the classroom holding one of the ferns up and walked out the opposite door. When I returned to the room, I asked them, how much Would we be able to say conclusively about this plant with just that passing glance, that brief opportunity of me walking through the room with the fern? Not much, was their answer. Then I gave them each new magnifying glasses and asked them to find 3 new things that they had not seen before. Look closely and carefully. If you discover any new thing, observe anything notable, say it out loud. The stem fades from the light green to reddish to black at the bottom. Individual leaves and fronds are all the same size and scale as the whole stalk. The leaf stalks alternate. There are hairs on the stem. There are seeds on the back. Are they seeds or eggs of an animal or the plant? There's a hollow tube in the stalk. They looked as hard as they could, noticing more carefully than we normally allowed ourselves, or time allowed. Then I gave them copies of Fern Hill. We're going to practice the same kind of looking on this poem. All you have to do is see how many things you can see. I could not say if the purchase of our magnifying glasses produced $280 worth of learning. I could not say if the magnifying glasses helped us understand Fern Hill better. But still I asked, what was learning worth at the bottom line, and how could we measure it? There was no test in the world that could measure the value of spending a morning looking closely at the stalks of woodland ferns and then reading Fern Hill. We came to the last line of the poem. Time held me green and dying, though I sang in my chains like the sea. Such a beautiful line, mysteriously loaded, as Hannah said, with substance. And we could have sat in the room to talk about that substance, to define it with more words that had less music or meaning. Normally, that's what teachers did. Instead, I ended the conversation. I looked out the window at the beautiful late fall light. The sun shone and the field was beckoning, the field of praise and animals, our field for children and for playing. It was so obvious. If I wanted them to understand the music of Thomas's windfall light and the sun born over and over, I had to send them out to feel it on their faces, the coolness of grass and the warmth of the long rays of sun stretching across the field. And if they could not hear the nightjars flying with the ricks, at least they might see the nuthatches in the low limbs and the crows high over the trees and the geese crisscrossing the cloudless sky. Go outside, you guys, into where it's green and golden. Lay down in the grass and meditate on the last line. Ask what it means to sing like that, pushing the chairs back. They headed into the day to understand the poem.
Thank you. That was gorgeous. Were you there, Cassie?
For that particular day?
I'm kidding.
Oh.
For another day. I mean, it's so great to hear the words read out loud. I'm just thrilled. And what beautiful cadence and the poetry of your words, Tal. Really great. I just love it.
Stolen off Dylan Thomas.
Well, inspired by, I mean, it's just, and when you hear the last words, it's funny. I guess my poetry degree in college, I knew the last line. It's just very, very powerful. So with your book, what do you like? Why? We know, as Daphith told us at the beginning that you wrote this other book, A Room for Learning, that was published by St. Martin's Press, that, reached probably a wider audience, but hopefully we'll keep these 2 books, putting them out there into the world. But, the reason obviously is educational, right? But I feel like with Hearts of the Mountain, you yourself open up so much in this book. And what was the process like for you? And why did you come to write this book?
As soon as I finished A Room for Learning, which just described how we had this idea, this very not quite formed idea of a school, and we started it. And it was kind of a comical tale of people who didn't really know what they were doing, with parents who had who didn't know what they were doing, with children who were adolescents who didn't know what they were doing, of coming together to try to start a school based on a sort of a dream of what a school could be. As soon as I finished that book, I sort of had the need to say, well, okay, that was fine, but look at what we did. Look, we started one fine, but what can you do once it's going, and what really happens? And I always had this feeling at the school that things are so magical and amazing and really not believable, even by other educators, that they need to be saved and recorded and put out into the world. This is actually possible. This is what kids could actually say or do. This is how it actually could be. So I wanted to. And the only way to do it is to prove it. And the only way to prove it is to show it. The only way to show it is to let the kids talk. And so the book is just really, I kind of try to put myself more in the background and let the kids be doing the things that happened in the course of a year or 3 years when they're at our school.
Oh, wow.
I suppose that I would hope that other teachers might say, so this actually can happen. Okay, I'm going to go start a school, because I'm not sure this can happen the way we do it. I'm not sure it can happen in the current structure of the public school system.
Yeah, which is sad. And it takes, I mean, I know that there are some, charter schools, like there was this program called Democracy Prep, and they got into some hot water down here in Marlborough, Vermont, following that, because I guess the founder he was taking money from the organization. It was just kind of a mess. They tried to buy Marlborough College when they went out of business. But, it's too bad, because there were a lot of people, who really wanted it to happen, and it didn't take off. And as you said, Tal, it's hard. And at the beginning, it's sort of chaotic. You have the parents, and then you have the adolescent kids, and, this sort of utopian ideal for a school. But how many years, is this your 21st year?
This is the 21st year. The school has 27 kids. 26, 27 pretty much is the target, 7th, 8th, and 9th grade. And it's essentially a one-room schoolhouse, though we have more than one room. And there's a lot of learning that goes across, cross-grade, cross-age learning, which is very important in the world of progressive education, that the most learning kids are going to do is from each other. And so you have them cross-age, because they're learning from younger and they're learning from older. They're learning through process, they're learning through a journey. So, so it's really, it has the ideals of being closer to nature, being outside of the mainstream, of being an intimate family, a sort of a sub-family, slightly larger than a family, but definitely smaller than a system, which kids this age really need. They're not ready to be in a system because they don't really know who they are. And so it's really important that they have a space where they can sort of write about themselves, think about themselves, learn how to be human, learn how to understand how they grow, learn how they relate to other kids, learn how they relate to the world. And then when they're in 9th grade, they're ready to go into a system. They have a firmer foundation. And that was the idea behind the school.
Wow.
In the case of, the dream of it for a teacher, the ideal part of it for teachers, you generally have kids that want to be there because they were looking for a place to be that wasn't like the rest of the world. And so you get kids like Cassie who want to be in the school, and they will work. And when they work and they're committed, and it's incredible what they do. And they want to be there every day. They like school. School is a fun place. It's a hard place. It's an emotional place. It's a real place. Their lives are allowed to be there and be included. And then you can have an actual relationship between humans and teachers and children that's not performative or technical or systematized, I guess. But it's just an authentic relationship between a bunch of kids and a bunch of teachers in a place where everyone's free to be themselves.
Oh, that's wonderful. And you as a writer, I know that you have a also have your own side sort of project as a writer. Do you blog? Are you still blogging?
I write essays from time to time when I get riled up or I feel like I need to teach the parents a lesson. um,
Awesome.
I recently wrote an essay, or this past weekend, I wrote about some things that have been happening in the local schools that aren't so hot. And that just made me think about like, what do we do to create the environment in our school? Like, what do we actually consciously do on the daily basis to make our school be the way it is? And I just kind of explored that. And one of the primary things was a sense of humor, which it's hard to tell sometimes with Cassie, but she has an insanely intense, droll sense of humor lurking behind pretty much everything she says. And it's sometimes frightened me as a teacher because I thought she was making fun of me a lot of times. She probably was making fun of me a lot of times, and which I deserved. But we want a sense of humor. We want the school to be laughing a lot, and we do. And you have this, like, life is pretty comical. It's a cosmic comedy. But on the other side, everything that we do matters. And so between those two poles is where we try to be at school. And so I wrote about that this weekend. So I'm doing that. I've tinkered around with writing a novel, and I've tinkered around with writing a novella, and I'm tinkering around with writing something about my father's later work towards the end of his life. But those are all like half cooked ideas right now. So.
Mm-hmm. And then do you really take your summer off?
Oh yeah. They ask, why do we do it? Why do we do this job with middle schoolers? There's only 3 reasons: June, July, and August.
That's great.
Now, being in Vermont is like being in heaven in the summer. So I'm done. I'm finished. We have graduation, and we garden, we walk the dogs, we sit on the screen porch. I write a little bit. I don't write a little bit. And that's part of the beauty of it for me, is that cycle. I don't think I could get out of the teaching cycle at this point,
Right.
to do anything else.
Right, and we're all in it. So obviously, really, the value of writing and reading literature is a big part of your school. But do the kids themselves, because they have they have so much to do with the making of the school, philosophically and physically and everything, the kids make the school, which I love, because they have like agency, they want to be there, they want to work hard. And so do you let them kind of create their own, bring in, I mean, have you discovered literature that the kids have brought to you, for example?
Well, Cassie spent the better part of her 7th grade year trying to make me read Harry Potter. And she succeeded. But
They're great.
it's more like they bring in their spirit and their personalities and their insanity, and even literally their, just their lives, their dog that died, the things they're afraid of outside of school, what's happening with their parents or their siblings or their grandparents, all of that we want that coming in. And then, stuff like today, like they went out and got the annual holiday bush and dragged it into my classroom and decorated it with garbage, basically. But, they're free to do that kind of stuff. And that's when they're happy. They want to be free to be who they are. And then you just throw a little structure around it from time to time to extract the lessons. And it's really not, the other part of this book is it's not that complicated. If you just ask kids, what do you want to learn about? What's important to you? What do you feel? What do you care about? They'll tell you, and you don't have to reinvent the entire wheel or come up with some insane rubric about what they're supposed to learn. It will just happen.
Well, the process of writing this book, like, did you like the way that a doctor would do notes at the end of a patient, visit? Oh, so and so has, high blood pressure or whatever. Did you, like, at the end of the day, write down? Because your descriptions, like, I felt like I was there in the room a lot of times. Like, how did you remember this stuff? Or did you kind of embellish it, or weave it?
A lot. Everything that is in the book actually happened.
Yeah. Okay, good.
And it's just and there's also certain patterns that kids this age will speak and say and talk about, the kinds of things they'll notice and feel and experience when we're doing whatever we do. So there's certain grooved understandings about how they're going to respond that helps. But a lot of these things I would write a short piece, a week later about something that happened at school, and I'd publish it. I would send it out to the parents because I want the parents to understand what we're doing. But the real reason, the real way that I could get mentally back to this is I could read what they had written that we published in the literary magazine. So I could go back to remembering how they came to write that piece of writing and the story behind it. So their writing that I have in, the thing, and some of the stunningly beautiful and magnificent that I'll never forget them anyway in a million years. And the idea was that every day there should be enough happening in a school there's a story to be told about it. And if there's no story to be told every day at school, then it's pretty boring and it's kind of a waste of time. So there was so much happening that was so shockingly incredible that how could you forget it? And so that was the idea.
Yeah. And I know I want to make sure that people in the audience have time to ask questions. So Daphith, do you want to kind of open that up? Because this is
Great thing. There's already a question here from Raymond for Cassie. Raymond says, when you're working on a story, does the shape or arc of it occur at once, or does the thing grow and reshape itself over time?
I think it grows over time. I think if I have too good of an idea of what I'm writing, I'll get bored while I write, and it's not something I want to feel. But another thing I was thinking about with this book just earlier today is that you can't really tell from how I ordered the stories, but I was kind of learning how to write a longer short story while I was writing these stories. So I had taken a class in microfictions, which I think has a different, obviously there are structural differences when you're writing within like 500 words. And then I was kind of learning to write longer and longer stories. And so in learning to write longer stories, I think I had to think about structure more. But a lot of it came as I was going, just because I was kind of learning while it happened. I don't know if that answers. Another thing I was thinking about while Tal was talking is that what we would write kind of long stories for North Branch. And the idea behind those stories is always, I think, that you're representing an internal change. And so that kind of inherently gives like a character-driven arc to your story. So I think a lot of times I'll start writing a story thinking of a character or a relationship between two characters and thinking of how that changed. So I think I do start with that idea, but maybe not a super clear idea of how it will be structured beyond that.
Wow. Someone have a question? Anyone else? So Cassie, I do have a question for you. Like, how I love that you're really open about like events in your own life, and maybe some characters from your life kind of make it into the story. Maybe some of them are here tonight, but I see a few Fanchers in the audience. But how does that work? I mean, would you say that like the majority of your stories and your writing, like where you pull from so much of writing is that anyway, but especially in your case, I'd love to hear what you have to say.
I think I pull a lot of real images, but I don't have any real stories, if that makes sense. So I feel like I kind of will pull small things, but I wouldn't say that like anybody I know is truthfully represented in any story. I'm not writing about real people, I'm writing about characters, but I take images or bits of dialogue or like ways that people construct their speech, I think are really interesting. So I don't know, I think I take small things from my real life and then try in the process of writing and editing to move further from real life.
To sort of expand. And do you try, well, I know you're in your MFA program and stuff, but do you like jot things down? You have a journal? Like, what's your process like?
Yeah, I write a lot by hand. My whole finger is like screwed up from it. Um, I think, yeah, I keep journals. I like to journal.
By hand, I love this. So many, well, because you're not even, you're too young to be a millennial. What are you? Whatever. So many young people, are way away from the analog. And that's why I love, Hearts of the Mountain, because Tal and the other teachers and there are only 3 of you, right, Tal?
Yeah, one of them's right here in the house with me, the science teacher, Rose.
There's Rose. Oh, wait, I see Rose waving to you. Oh my God. And but you get the kids outside, and you literally you mentioned, I mean, in that piece that you read, the outdoors, and especially with the pandemic times, that outdoor education, we're seeing a real interest in that. And you, of course, were doing that before anyone, and do you think that that's just something it's obviously really lacking in public schools, but I know that there's a huge interest in getting the kids outside and getting them out there.
I mean, it's hard to teach stuff when you're outside because you need a little spatial compression to make kids pay attention. And the bigger the space and the more distractions, it's hard to teach stuff. I don't think you could teach a geometry class outside. And I've experimented with trying to teach literature outside. Like, we've sat on a stone wall to read Mending Wall by Frost, but they end up just like poking the rocks a lot because they're middle schoolers. So you have to be real about it. But last year we had to go out for about 8 weeks for cases, but we spent 2 whole days a week at school outdoors in the hardcore part of the winter. It was, I think Rose even did a lab on wave frequency when it was 17 degrees outside. But we spent most of that time just being together, which is really what middle schoolers kind of need, essentially. They need to learn how to need to learn how to be human with other people and to know how to relate and to find out what they need and how to get it and how to listen to other people and learn from other people on a real fundamental level.
And that's
so
the place to do it.
It was like we had snowball fights. We dug trenches, we made forts, we built snow sculptures. One day the teachers, we set up a thing where we could, the goal was that we got to throw snowballs at them as hard as we possibly could, which we had, a lot of repressed anger came out. Nice. I'm kidding.
Well, we do have a question has come in.
But
I'm sorry, I was just going to say a question's come in from someone, and it's Cassie. This is for you, Tal. Cassie talked about learning from Tal at the North Branch School about complex relationships and seeing a whole person or character, in your writing. Tal, how have your students been relating to recent characters in the literature books they are reading, to their own lives and experiences, or to the facets of themselves?
That's from where I'm sitting. That's the only important thing about reading at this age, is for them to learn and believe that the characters they're reading about are real people.
Like them.
Yeah. Like this person, I tell them, this person we're reading about, they are a person, and you have to relate to them, listen to them, understand them as though they're a person in the room. And so Scout, Boo, Dill, Jem, those people, they are them, and that's what thrills them. In the case of there's a big section in the book where one of the boys, Gus, felt empathetic for the horse, Boxer, and Animal Farm, and that's a very personal relationship that he felt that was bringing up things that were inside of him that had nothing to do with the book. So the book served the purpose of sort of awakening that. Why does he have to work so hard and nothing ever comes from it? That was his question.
Oh, that was the story of Callum, one of the kids.
Right.
Oh, I love
that.
So
to me, though, I don't see a point in reading Huck Finn unless they understand their own lives as a journey. They're taking down a river and they don't know where they're going to go. and they don't know what's going to happen next. That's why we read that. There's a lot of other reasons, but that's the primary one. So when they start thinking about themselves as Huck's on a journey, he's learning how to relate to Jim. I'm on a journey, and I'm learning how to relate to myself, and my parents, and everyone around me. Then there's a feeding frenzy between the book and themselves. So it's really important.
Mm, that's great. And seeing themselves. I mean, our press is part of a group called We Need Diverse Books, which is, you probably have heard of it. Daphith, I know that it's big in the book world because publishing has just been so white for so long, and it's just so important not only for kids to see themselves in books, but to see themselves, racially, and the diversity of life that, in terms of that. I'm sure at your school, because Vermont's like, I think the whitest state in the country, or the tied with Maine or something, but you probably don't have as much diversity, racial diversity. But what I loved is there was one student in the book, Hearts of the Mountain, who I believe was adopted from Ethiopia.
Yep.
Yeah, and that was really great because, like, being Black in the state, and how that came through too. But and socioeconomically, Vermont is very diverse. So is your school open to people financially who can't afford it?
We have what's called need blind admission policy, which we admit kids irregardless of a family's ability to pay.
Yay.
So we struggle a little bit to reach everyone because there's cultural, neighborhoodly pressures to just go the course. So we get a lot of kids who have struggled in one way or the other, or just feel outside of the system, or the system hasn't served them well. We get a lot of kids coming to us who've been bullied, just like the system didn't deal with that very well.
They fell through
We have a lot of kids who've been homeschooled or have different kinds of learning disabilities, whatever, just learning differences. I think that we have I have a belief that we have vast diversity among us, no matter who, what color, where, or what. And what we find at school over time is that no matter who we are, where we came from, what education our parents had, or the color of our skin, there's just unbelievably beautiful nuances of diversity within us. And that's kind of what we're trying to shoot for with the kids, is just to see who each of us are, so that by the end of the year, you got 25 people who are so different than you, and you have so much to learn from each one of them. We're limited. We can't be racially diverse because we're not here, but we can learn how to see who's around us and be honest about that.
Yeah. Yeah. I love how in the book you introduce the kids, especially like to Martin Luther King and, some heroes, and bring diversity through speeches and literature and all of that. Because we are sort of winding down now, I do have a question to move over to Cassie, and how am I doing, Daphith?
Yeah, okay. We got time for about one more question, I think, or maybe a couple. Cassie, you're not saying your answers are not that long, so we've got time for a couple more.
Yeah. But Cassie, I wanted to ask you, like, who are your influences? Because really, I've said this before, but you have your writing is so mature, and we know you went to North Branch and you had this like really wonderful foundation with your writing. But who do you read? I mean, because reading is so important. Obviously, Tal is incredibly well read. I feel like as I said before, that I'm like in school in a good way. I'm part of the effects of the North Branch School as a reader. Like, I'm learning, and my curiosity is open, which is so great. So you yourself, Cassie, who are your favorite writers? I know obviously Julia Alvarez, how the Garcia girls got their accents and all that, but
yeah, I changes all the time. I feel like a lot of times I'll read a book, and then whoever I'm reading, if I'm enjoying it, that's my favorite writer at the moment. But
yeah, like I'm reading Miriam Toews right now. It's called Women Talking. It's phenomenal.
Yeah, I've been reading some of Mavis Gallant's stories and really enjoying those. I've been reading or rereading, I guess, Danielle Evans' stories. Those always make me feel like make me feel inspired to write. And And I also have been really loving
Danielle-
Lee.
Sorry, interrupt. Danielle Evans. Never heard of
Yeah.
her. Cool. I'm gonna write this down.
Yeah, I highly recommend her writing. And then I've really been loving Lee's writing as well. She came a couple of years ago, pre-pandemic, to the writers series at my school. And I don't know, I really like her work. Since then, I've been reading a lot of her stuff.
E.M. Lee.
Lee, yeah.
That's great. What about you, Tal? Tell us what you're reading.
I don't mean this to be mean. I don't read a lot of fiction. I mostly for the last 5 years have read mostly history and biographies. I have this undying urge to wish that I lived in a revolutionary time period, whatever that might be. And so I feel like my life is hitting a standstill sometimes as a teen. So I've been reading, I read all of David McCullough's books.
Love Dave.
And
I got to meet him once.
Yeah, he's incredible.
Ran into him in Boston.
I'm reading a book right now about the Marblehead sailors and soldiers from the Revolutionary War. But poetry-wise, that's the other thing I read a fair bit of. And a particular favorite is Hayden Carruth. I don't even know how to say his name.
Carruth.
And Jack Gilbert in particular. I find their poems to be, and then Kevin Young put out a book of poems a couple years ago called
He's
Brown.
got a new book out, new and selected.
Yeah, that one just undid me. I have a big focus in my own life about the history of African-American history and the history of the civil rights movement. So reading his poems just kind of lit me up. And so I bounced around with that a lot. But you know, anything that will take me into another, I feel like as I get older, I'm not going to get to go to many places. I'm not, you know, there's just not the chances to go to places or times, but in history or biography, I can go visit places that I wouldn't have a chance ever to go. And so that feels
through
like
through the books.
Yeah, like I can go be, you know, there's a book Hamnet that's out about Shakespeare's daughter.
I'm reading it right now. His son got mysteriously ill.
Right. And so just
plague.
Just to feel alive in you know, in 1607, you know, that's intriguing to me.
Oh God. One of my favorite books is called A Year of Wonder by Geraldine Brooks. And it's about the plague in England. It's set in a small village, and it like she's a journalist, you know, so it's like really an amazing.
Yeah.
So that's so cool to hear what you guys are reading. I've already like written down, so hopefully. So here's a question from Barbara, but I don't know if we have time. It's great. It's what was the first thing that inspired you to start a school? What was the catalyst? That's a good question. The
catalyst was
briefly.
I was a stay-at-home dad with my sons, and I started worrying about where they were going to go to middle school.
Cool.
And I figured their middle school needed to be what it was like when we were hanging out at home. I want to do the things with middle schoolers that I want them to be doing the things as middle schoolers that we did when they weren't, where they were 4 and 6.
Great.
So it was that's the whole story is told in A Room for Learning. It's a comedy of errors and glory. But that feeling of being with them for 3 years and then saying, okay, what world do I want for them as a school when they get to be the age that I teach? I'm going to make that school. So I asked them, what should I teach the teenagers, you guys? And they gave me a list, and I used that list as the guiding foundation.
No, that's awesome.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Teach about Martin Luther King. That's on there. Teach them that cats are soft. Don't knock over other people's block towers, that kind of stuff. That's what they told me.
Wasn't there teaching how to use a hammer?
Teach them how to use a hammer. See, she remembers, and we try to teach the kids how use a hammer at the school.
You know
We're
what,
not-
Anthony Bourdain said that, the late Anthony Bourdain, I love Kitchen Confidential, but he said that every high school graduate in the country should know how to roast a chicken.
Yep. We have sweeping lessons.
That's great. If the hammer. So this has been-
Those are, that's a great note to end on. I think that's a fantastic list. Yeah, what can be better than using a hammer, roasting a chicken? How,
Living in
Cassie,
Vermont.
Dee Dee, thank you all so much. This has been a wonderful evening. I've got the links back in the chat there. You can order their books, Hearts of the Mountain or Street of Widows at northshire.com or another independent bookstore.
Help us spread the word, these
Yeah.
wonderful books.
Thank you all so much, and take care and happy holidays.
Yeah,
So
we
you
can,
Thanks,
we can get the link from this talk will be on your YouTube channel.
That's right. I'll have it up on our YouTube channel within the next week, usually about 24 hours, and we can share it there.
Thanks to everyone
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone.
for hosting us.